Come on, Dobbins. Come on, Dobbins. So, I don't know if you noticed it or not, but I'm wearing my fancy robes. I think I mentioned this before, but I always forget to bring these when I come here on a special service. Because usually, when you're invited, I've told you the hardest thing about being a minister is the wardrobe for me. So when you're, like I went to Fresno on 7th, 8th, and 9th to do their O-higan special service. I drove up, I did a seminar on Saturday, and I did their special service on Sunday, and I wore just my regular black robes with my mukasa, because I was a visitor. But I always thought if you go and you're being invited somewhere else, and you're visiting, you should put on your best clothes, right? That's like the Western, right? Like I should dress up, because I'm a guest, but you don't. So usually when I come here, I don't bring these, because I think I'm a guest. But Vista's is being overseen by Reverend Harada. So I'm still at home, even though I drove down here. And then I learned some interesting things from Reverend Nakata. Well, first of all, I have 3 colored robes. We all have 3 colors. We have this color for special services, except for New Year's Eve. And I don't know why. But right, the exception always proves the rule. So we wear these robes, and this is kind of an earth color, right? Green, avocado. And then we have black robes that we wear for funerals and for New Year's Eve. I don't know why. And then I have a really nice white robe that makes me very nervous because I don't want to spill on it. And I also look better than the bride a lot of times. So I've got this gorgeous white robe for weddings. And I did tell a bride, I told her we were having a meeting, and I said, you better kick it up a notch, because I'm bringing it. She didn't laugh at all. I think she's really nervous. I probably shouldn't have done that. So it's not good to make jokes, right? I didn't know her that well, and it didn't go over well. But Reverend Nakata told me that traditionally, in India, they wore earth-colored robes, earth tones. So saffron, yellow, orange. And he told me that when Buddhism came to China, that orangey color was the color of inmates or prisoners. So like orange is the new black. So he told me in China, they switched over to black and white from the earth tones because of the conflict culturally with that color being associated with prisoners and criminals. And so the black and white, he told me, are actually Taoist colors. We kind of adopted Taoist because that was the dominant religion in China at the time. And that's why when people ask me, like, well, why don't you dress like the Dalai Lama? Well, I guess that's the reason why. I never knew. So he wears kind of a purplish color. And then, this is kind of an earth fall. Linda made me wear a yellow tie, so it's fall. So I wanted to start out today. I'm having trouble. We've verified that it's not the batteries, and it's not Vista. I think there's something wrong with my pointer. All right. So special service today is for what they call O-higan, and O is an honorific, so it's higan, and it's about going from this shore to the other shore, going from our everyday secular life and try to transcending the way we normally live, and spiritually reaching the other shore. And it's not something far away in terms of space, but it seems really far away perhaps in terms of time. It feels outside ourselves, but it's very close if we just have insight. And this is one of the really famous images of going to other shore in our tradition. This is the river of fire, river of water. The fire represents greed and anger. Anger, and the water represents greed. And there's a little person right here who's following this thin white path. It's about 6 inches wide. And Shinran goes through all the symbols in this in detail. He says that it's like a path or a trail. And the meaning behind that is that if you see a path or a trail, like if you go hiking, that means lots of people have gone that way. It's been worn into the ground. And so you can have confidence taking it because everybody's taken it and gotten wherever they were going to go, and you can kind of relax. So that's what it means by path or trail. And then over here are kind of the things that get in our way. There's angry people. There's, I guess, some criminals in here. There's a lion. There's just a lot of commotion and havoc on this shore. And there's even some ministers over here. I think they're pointing away. And then here is the Buddha, symbolically pointing to the other shore, kind of encouraging us to take this path and to have confidence. And then the idea is that through practice and time and effort, we reach and meet a Buddha, which is symbolic for ultimate truth or transcendent wisdom. So the theme of O-higan is this idea of taking a path that's transformative. So what I wanted to talk about today, I'm probably the first minister who's going to give a Dharma talk on hockey. This is the great eight, Alexander Ovechkin. He plays for, and I'm not, as we get into this, I'm not an expert on hockey. I learned about this through a surrogate, vicariously through my daughter, Emily, who's insane about hockey, and Tony Kornheiser, who I'm insane about. I told you there's the Buddha, and there's Tony Kornheiser. In that order. He's called the Great Eight. He's from Russia. He's a Russian hockey player. This is usually what it looks like at the end of the season for him. His head's down. They've lost in the playoffs again. He's like the Karl Malone of hockey, or Charles Barkley. He's the greatest hockey player to never win anything. He's great in the regular season, and he dies in the playoffs. And so much so that they wanted to get rid of him, because he's just not going to get you there, right, on the path. He'll get you halfway on the path, and then it's over. It doesn't work out. So in 2017, in early July, he actually won. You got to know what that is. That's the Stanley Cup. So he wins the Stanley Cup on the road in Las Vegas against the Vegas Knights, an expansion team. And so this talk is, how in the world did Ovechkin get from 11 years of futility to winning the Stanley Cup? And it's a path. And I think we can learn, there's examples of the path in our everyday life. And Buddhism's not idealistic, it's not a Hallmark card. It actually works, and it's very practical. And I think sometimes we don't have practical examples. We kind of talk about it in a theoretical way, or to encourage people. But there's examples where it actually works. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, but my daughter got very angry and upset with me that I was going to do a talk on Ovechkin, because he's like the enemy of the Mighty Ducks in Anaheim. She hates the Caps from Washington, D.C. She got very upset with me. How can you do a talk on Ovechkin? She said, are you saying Ovechkin's Buddhist? Are you saying Ovechkin's a Buddha? I said, no, I'm not saying any of those things. I'm saying we can look at his life and we can learn something, a deep lesson from it. So, but she still, she wouldn't come to OCBC when I gave this talk. I'm not kidding. She still thinks this is a terrible talk. But before we get started, I wanted to go over this again. This is Tony Kornheiser. He did Monday Night Football. He did Part of the Interruption. He's got a podcast. I listen to it all the time. We went back to Philadelphia in August to see T graduate from Physician's Assistant School. I keep saying PA, and I forget, maybe people don't know what a PA is. He went to Philadelphia to graduate as a physician's assistant in August. And remember the joke, he went to PA to become a PA. So we went back there, we saw Philadelphia. I went to Independence Hall. I thought that was in Boston. It's not, it's in Philadelphia. A lot of stuff that I thought happened in Boston, it happened in Philadelphia. And we went to Independence Hall, and they had a park ranger there. And he would ask us questions, basic questions about history. Absolute silence. Everyone was just like, I got nothing. It was embarrassing. So we went to Philadelphia, and then we went to Washington, D.C. And the main reason we went to Washington, D.C. was to take a pilgrimage to see where Tony Kornheiser records his podcast. This is not a joke. This is not a joke. Now, we saw the Jefferson Memorial. We saw the Lincoln Memorial. I saw the memorial for Martin Luther King. I saw the Korean War Memorial, the Vietnam War Memorial. I saw them in the day and at night. But where Tony records his podcasts was especially moving for me. So this is me. I look kind of like a dorky tourist. I didn't realize I looked like this. I thought I was a lot slimmer. I didn't think I looked like this, but this is me on vacation. I am so happy. This is the restaurant that Tony Kornheiser bought. It's called Chatter, and it's on the corner of Wisconsin and Jennifer Street, just inside the Washington, D.C. border. He used to do his podcast from an undisclosed third-floor location in Washington, D.C. But with some friends, he ended up buying this restaurant, and within it is the studio. And he takes August off, so he wasn't there. But you can actually watch him do the podcast in the morning if you go for breakfast. And we went and ate, and I was gushing like a schoolgirl, and the waiter said, "Do you want to go into the podcast, the studio?" And I said, "Could I?" And then she said, "We'll even let you sit in his chair." And I went, "Oh my God, it's happening." So this is the recording studio right off the bar at the restaurant. And you can see me a little bit back here sitting in Tony's chair. Go ahead, Dean. See, I could do my own podcast. Okay, here's another one. Linda took this of me. Okay, now we're going to get back to the Dharma talk. The reason why I wanted to mention this is I learned about the caps through the agony of Tony Kornheiser and his podcast. This has been going on for 4 or 5 years. I hear about it all the time. So I got this from Emily off of Facebook. Emily posted this. It says, everybody has a favorite season. There's spring, summer, and fall. And then it says, this is mine, hockey season. So on the left is Sidney Crosby of the Pittsburgh Penguins. And that is Alexander Ovechkin, number 8. They're both captains of the Washington Capitals. And this is a lot like Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, except Ovechkin's never won anything. It's really bad. So they're good friends, but he always loses to Crosby. And he lost twice to Crosby, and Crosby went on to win the Stanley Cup 2 years in a row. And repeating a Stanley Cup is very difficult. And it was on the back of Alexander Ovechkin. Now, Emily and Linda told me to cut down on some of the stats. I got a little stat heavy. Linda said this morning, it was a good talk, but maybe you could kind of not talk so much about stats. So this was on the internet. It's called All Capsized, a not-so-brief history of the Capitals' playoff collapses. So in 2014-2015, after surviving a 7-game series with the New York Islanders, the Capitals ran up a 3-1 series lead on the Rangers in the conference semis. So they're up 3-1, and it fell apart. The Capitals lost 3 straight games. I heard all about it. 2015-2016, I forgot what this was called, but when you have the best record of the season, you win the President's Cup. So they had the best regular season record, and usually teams that do that do quite well in the playoffs. Washington loses to the Penguins against Sidney Crosby in only the second round, 4-2. They watched from the sidelines as the rival Penguins go on to win the Stanley Cup. This was excruciating. I had to listen to this for months. 2016-2017, they win the President's Cup 2 years in a row, the best regular season record. They're on fire. The Pittsburgh Penguins ran up a 3-1 lead, but the Caps win games 5 and 6. So there's a game 7. They're shut out by the Penguins. The Penguins go on again to win the Stanley Cup. So you start to get this negative, we're doomed, we're never going to win. You know, like, it's hopeless. We're jinxed. It's a curse. So after another crushing playoff loss, uncomfortable questions about Alex Ovechkin's future arise. So a lot of people said that it really doesn't matter how good he is in the regular season. On the podcast, they were saying we've just got to get rid of him. I mean, we may have the best record in the regular season, but so what? we're never going to win the Stanley Cup. We need to drop him. He's a dog. And they said a lot worse things than that. Hockey players are vicious. Next. So this year, the curse was lifted. The Capitals beat the Penguins in overtime in Game 6 to advance to the conference finals. So they end up, it's 3-2. The game is away. It's in Pittsburgh. And I remember Tony saying, if they don't win this on the road, if they don't win this 4-2, if they come home 3-3, he said, we're going to blow it. We're going to lose. We have to win this on the road. We can't give them another game. And they did. They beat Sidney Crosby. And then they were worried that they were so excited about beating Crosby, there'd be a letdown. So I don't remember, and Linda told me to cut this out, but they went through 2 more series after the Penguins, and they end up playing the Las Vegas Knights, the Golden Knights. And this is an expansion hockey team that made it to the finals. And I'm not positive, but I think they said on the podcast that no expansion team has ever made it to the finals. Right? Usually you're really bad. They were going to win the Stanley Cup. They were on their way to winning the championship in Las Vegas in their first expansion season. And my daughter was on cloud 9 because she likes the Ducks, she likes the Vikings, and the Vikings, and she hates the Capitals. So what happens is they split at home at the Caps. It's 1-1 after they're in Washington. They go to Las Vegas to play Game 3. If they lose Game 3, they go down 2-1. They lose home ice advantage, and all is lost and doomed. So Alex Ovechkin is actually on the bench right now, and their goalie's name there is Braden Holtby, and he saves the game with this miraculous stop. It's called a stick save, which I don't know that much about because I played football. But he's got his glove hand on the left, and he's got his stick on the right, and he's out of position. He's blocking the left net, the left goal, and they swing it across, and they take a shot from the right, and he's turned the wrong way, and he takes his stick without looking, and he blocks the puck. And I guess this never happens. It's very difficult to block a puck with your stick. And once he does this, the curse has been lifted. They haven't won the series yet, but it's kind of fait accompli. So it's a little bit like the path. Once you're all in and you have confidence in the path, and you're focused and you're directed and you're oriented properly, your destination is just a matter of time. All you have to do now is relax and walk. So this is it. Stanley Cup Finals. I guess it was... I'm sorry, I think it was at home. It was at home, and the Vikings are up 1-0 in the series. I guess it was off by 1. There's 2 minutes left. Washington's winning. They can't go down 2-0 at home. And so I wanted to show you this play with 2 minutes to go.
Into the crease, and now the hash marks as it's still back in. Sent across. It was stuck with the wide open net. Incredible stop by Braden Holtby. It's an adventure right there. Now watch this. The puck goes across. Tuck has a wide open net, and the paddle of the stick. Holtby.
In Washington, they'll be calling this the save.
Now as he comes off the ice, Devontae Smith-Miller right next to him goes, that's got to be the save of the year.
Incredible stop, desperation, back the other way. The puck took the crazy bounce, and next thing you know, they're attacking.
So that's Alexander Ovechkin right there. So I think that the story is better than I first thought about it. Washington was on the road. Are they at home? They were on the road. They were about to go down 2-0, and this ties the series 1-1, and they head back to Washington. So yeah, if they had lost this game, they would have been down 2-0 coming home. And this next slide I wanted to show you. Go ahead. They call this a boomerang on Facebook. It's when they have a clip that goes around and around and around. So Alexander Ovechkin wasn't even on the ice, and this is his reaction to the save. So when I was at Tony's restaurant, Chatter, on the wall is the stick, right? This is the stick. So I mean, this is a huge deal. I don't know if the Capitals ever won the Stanley Cup, but this is the stick. Okay, next. So 2017, 2018, the Capitals go up 3-1 on the Vikings. If the Capitals squander, on the Knights, if the Capitals squander this 3-1 lead in the Stanley Cup final, it would mark the 11th time in franchise history they found a way to lose a playoff series after building a 2-game cushion. So, you know, Tony was like, if they don't win this 4-1, we're doomed, right? Teams leading 3-1 in a best-of-7 playoff series have won 91% of the time, or 276 out of 28. But the bad news is, the Caps account for 5 of those 28 collapses, the most of any franchise. So they still think they're doomed to lose to the Knights. So the great wait finally ends. After 11 seasons, Alan Ovechkin finally wins, well, the team finally wins the Stanley Cup. They beat them 4-1, and they take the Stanley Cup. And this is Ovechkin skating around the ice in Las Vegas. And you know how they say whatever happens in Vegas stays in Vegas? The Capitals said that they were bringing the cup home, right? The Stanley Cup's not staying in Vegas. They're bringing it home. So he's been happy on cloud 9 for like the last 3 or 4 months. He hasn't stopped smiling. He finally broke through. So again, the question is, how did he get from this picture up in the upper left to this picture on the bottom right after 11 years? And on the Tony Kornheiser show,
what I read and what I
oh, sorry. Yeah, go back. Well, you want to? Oh, there you go. Go back. Okay, here we go. So, on the Tony Kornheiser show, they talked about Ovechkin, and they said what he did this year that he's never done before is he stopped trying to be the best player. He'd always tried to score the most goals, have the most points, be the leader through example, but basically playing for his own personal statistics. And that's often the way players are rewarded at contract time. But he did that for 11 years, and it never worked. So this year, he decided to take a totally different approach. He decided to be the best leader. So what he did was he decided to get the most assists. He wanted to get the most steals. He wanted to get the most takeaways. And so he kind of was an example, and he pulled the rest of his teammates around them and made them better, much like Michael Jordan or LeBron James. And so I want you to hear this clip from the podcast after they won the Stanley Cup.
What I read and what I've heard from some others is that for years, Ovechkin kept trying to be the best player, the best player, the best player, and wasn't getting it done. Fairly or unfairly, he was being given all the responsibility for them not winning. What I've read is that coming into this last year, Ovechkin says, okay, I'm going to be the best leader I can be. And
For the first time. He's going to block shots. He's going to do all that. Yeah.
He's going to block shots. He's going to do all this. He's going to say more to the guys in the locker room. And then you saw what happened. Then opportunities started coming up that they didn't have before when it was just about him being the best player. I always find the psychology of these things fascinating.
And when you look at him in these moments of joy, the other players seem to love his joy.
Yeah.
And I don't know that was the case in prior years. This is the year they were not expected to do.
Right.
They had been expected before. They were not.
This is what always often happens, is that the the team that actually wins the title is never the most talented team.
So they weren't the most talented team, but they were the best team to play together as one. Okay, so the question was, be the best player or be the best leader. Go ahead, next one. So I think it's another one of those false choices we have in the West. I think you can be the best player by being the best leader. He actually won. This is kind of amazing. I can't remember what this was because I don't know hockey that well. But this is, I think, the Conn Smythe Award, the award for the best performance in the Stanley Cup. So by deferring and by making assists and playing defense and passing and being part of the team and raising up all of the teammates around him and actually being on the goal when the season was saved, being on the bench, Ovechkin actually wins the greatest personal trophy you could win at the Stanley Cup. It's the MVP trophy. So I really think this is an important example on leadership. I mean, you can lead through negative reinforcement. You can lead by being a bully. You could lead by yelling and screaming. But I think he led by people wanted to follow him. He was part of them now. He was their leader in the sense that he was with them and he had their back. And he did whatever needed to be done for the team to succeed. And so I really think he went on a major journey and really changed the outlook, and he changed his game in a year. It's very difficult to do. If you've played for 11 years, it's very difficult to suddenly change your game. And so I think these examples are in our culture, but they're not highlighted a lot. I was reading a book the other day. I have a paper on it we'll read sometime. It's about philosophical assumptions in India. My wife read that title of the book and thought, oh my gosh, this sounds like the most boring book ever. And it is a scholarly book. But it's set in the West. We kind of valorize, or what takes supremacy in our culture in general is being able to control our emotions and our behavior through rational thought and discipline. We tend to hold that up as the epitome of a successful life. And there's exceptions to this rule, but in general. And this philosopher, I think he was from Washington State, he said that in India, in general, what's held up in the highest regard and esteem, it's not that morals and ethics and discipline aren't important, but what's held up as the highest epitome of leading an important life is for somebody to live a life of authenticity, to find one's true self, to be real, to be free. And so this is an example, I think, of Ovechkin reaching that level from an Indian point of view. From what I've heard, he's not the nicest guy in the world. I don't know about his morals and ethics. I may not want to hang out with him, but he finally found his driving essence as a player, as a hockey player. He finally discovered his identity and what really fits for him. And sometimes they call this following your bliss. He may have been chasing statistics, and maybe he wasn't happy doing that, but it was the way he got fame and fortune. But really what he wanted was not personal reward, but he wanted to win a title with a team and win the cup. And that became the most important thing in his life. And when it did, and his focus changed, he found a new path. And he dedicated himself to being a teammate and a member of something larger than himself. And in doing so, for the first time ever, he was able to finally break through and win the Stanley Cup on a team that didn't have as much talent, but was much more cohesive and played as a unit. And you don't see this a lot. It happened with the Detroit Pistons a while back with Larry Brown. These things do happen in the pros. I think it happens with the New England Patriots a lot. I don't know if you know this, but Belichick, he doesn't draft the best players. He looks for guys that had really good GPAs and were captains of their teams. He likes to draft team captains from college because he said those are the guys that lead through example. They pull people along. They're smart. They're intellectual, and they're not. It's not all based on just innate talent. They're coachable, and that strategy, that paradigm, has worked incredibly well for Belichick and the New England Patriots. So I just wanted to bring an example of this idea of following your bliss, being authentic, kind of marching to a path that fits you without regard for external objective measures, and being quite happy and quite successful. And so I think this is what we try to do in Buddhism. We try to find out who we are, we try to find out our true self, and live a life that's authentic and free. And we just had Dr. Uno, Tetsuo Uno, at our O-higan ceremony and today, and seminar yesterday. He always says to us that the point of the Buddhist path is not to be a nice person. He says it's to be real and authentic. And so I've heard these notes, I've heard this message in our tradition for a really long time about, it's not about being nice, it's about being real. And I got this book on Indian philosophy, and I mean, this dates back, this is just basic Eastern thought. It's not unique to Jodo Shinshu. We may be amplifying it and focusing on it, but this is a basic cultural norm in the East. That the man, the true woman who lives their own life and blazes their own trail and lives authentically with freedom is the highest achievement one can do. And that's what is held up as the example in that culture. And so it's a little bit different from the West. Ovechkin needs discipline. He needs rationality to practice and to do the drills and to eat right, but it's not enough to win the cup. So, thank you very much. Please join me in Gasho. Namo Amitabha. Namo Amitabha. Namo.